CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ten soldiers among 19 people killed as militants defy a state of siege declared in two DRC provinces. Ethiopia designates TPLF as a terrorist organization. We'll bring you the latest details. And Israel mourns the death of 45 pilgrims on Friday. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, Egypt targets more economic growth as reforms enter phase 2. Plus, we highlight efforts to get more women into top-level sport in Ethiopia. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a militant raid has left at least 10 soldiers dead. They're among the 19 killed after militants attacked two villages in the eastern DRC. The attack happened hours after President Felix Tshisekedi declared a state of siege in the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri. The East has seen a surge in violence. Intercommunal violence has killed over 300 people since the start of the year. Well, let's cross over now to CGTN's Chris Ochamringa. He's in Kinshasa, standing by for us. Chris, what more details do you have about this latest attack?
Yes, so Beatrice, this attack happened on Saturday in Beni territory. That's in North Kivu province. That's a province that has had very many attacks since 2019 after the DRC government launched a large-scale military offensive against all the rebel groups in that area. No group has claimed responsibility, and it's not known yet who was behind it, but the officials in the area suspect it to have been carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces. This is an Islamist militia that's originally from Uganda. It's been operating in eastern DRC, killing very many people in that area. That's what the local authorities are saying. And there was also another attack, besides the one where 19 people were killed, 10 of them soldiers. There was another attack of a Muslim cleric that happened later on Saturday. A popular Muslim cleric was killed inside the central mosque in Beni while preaching, while delivering a message to people. He's said to have been known to be preaching against Islamic radicalism, and people suspect he was killed because of his messages. It has shocked very many people in Beni, and people in Kinshasa and also in Beni have been protesting against this continuous killing of civilians in the area. They have been putting a lot of pressure on the president, who has deployed troops. Very many troops have been deployed in Beni and the northeast of DRC, Ituri province, where there has been an increase in attacks. And so people are still disappointed that the government has deployed people, but the killings are continuing to happen. Beatrice?
Well, Chris, we understand that the attack took place just hours after President Tshisekedi declared a state of siege in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. Had these anticipated security measures been put in place?
Well, they have been put in place. Now, this attack, the state of siege, took effect immediately after the president declared it. That was on Friday. So the people there, what happened is that there was a restriction of the movement of people in and outside of North Kivu province and Ituri province. These are the two areas where there have been very many killings of civilians, and police were given the right to arrest people without any charge. If they had reason to believe that someone was either a rebel or collaborating with them, he could arrest them, without following the normal procedures. And so this was supposed to have taken place, but then it's a very complicated conflict. These rebels in eastern DRC are people who live within the community, so they understand the terrain very well. They know who the soldiers are, and we've also been informed that some of them go to attack civilians dressed in Congolese army uniforms. And so it's very difficult for the civilians to distinguish between the genuine Congolese soldiers, the FARDC, and these rebels. And that is what has been complicating this whole the fight against against rebels in eastern DRC. The president has said he's going to do everything necessary to ensure that he stops these attacks. He has already signed a partnership with the Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta, to send in troops to help them to beef up this fight against rebels in eastern DRC.
Chris Chamringa joining us there from Kinshasa with that update on the DRC. Now, Ethiopia's Council of Ministers has designated the Tigray People's Liberation Front and Shene as terrorist organizations. Once endorsed by Parliament, the decision will enable the government to take decisive measures against the groups and anyone affiliated with them. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
A statement released after the Ethiopian Council of Ministers decided to categorize both the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, and Shene as terrorist organizations reads, and I quote, "This decision will become applicable to organizations and individuals who collaborate, have links with, or relate to the ideas and actions of the designated terrorist organizations and others who have engaged in similar activities," end of quote. And once approved by the Parliament, this will give the government additional powers and legal ground to hunt down these groups and bring them to justice. The government claims attacks on civilians seen in the country over the last 3 years were either sponsored or plotted by TPLF and Shene. Shene likes to call itself the Oromo Liberation Army. In 2020, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered a crackdown against the TPLF after the group attacked the Ethiopian army. Some experts said the latest decision has the potential of assisting the Prime Minister to win the war against groups that are said to disrupt peace and stability of the nation. On the other hand, some also warn Addis Ababa should take extra precautionary measures while implementing the law to
half-mast at public buildings, army bases and diplomatic missions. There is reportedly to be a moment of silence. The incident is one of the nation's worst peacetime disasters. Funerals have been taking place in several locations, including Jerusalem, after the end of the Sabbath. Stephanie Fried reports from the pilgrimage site.
The focus is on a number of things. First, identifying victims. 32 have been identified out of 45. Also burying the victims. 22 people were buried on Friday, and that's according to Jewish religion. When someone dies, the aim religion-wise is to have a person buried as quickly as possible, and specifically before sundown on the Sabbath. Saturday, Friday night is the start of. Today, Saturday, is the Sabbath. Among the victims, just to note, children, teenagers, 2 sets of brothers from the same family. Benjamin Netanyahu declared it one of the biggest catastrophes in the country's history, peacetime history. He also declared Sunday a national day of mourning. And I'm standing outside. I'm a little bit down the road from the pilgrimage site where this all happened. The investigation gets underway. It's already underway. The northern commander of the police said he's taken responsibility. He and the chief of police will be called in for investigation. But looking at analysis, and analysts are saying that the police they're being looked at, they're being fingered unfairly because there were so many recommendations before this catastrophe took place to limit the numbers of people.
Violence is on the rise after the U.S. failed to keep a deal to withdraw troops by May the 1st. Taliban militants seized an army base in the eastern province of Ghazni late Friday. A provincial official said 25 security personnel from the base are missing. Also on Friday, a car bomb killed at least 27 people and wounded dozens in the neighboring province of Logar. Students were among the casualties. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the attack and extended his condolences to the people of Afghanistan. U.S. President Joe Biden now says all American forces will leave by September the 11th. Here are some views from Afghans on the withdrawal.
There's nothing to worry about. First of all, we will not rely that much on foreign forces, so that when they leave, we'll be able to continue. And secondly, the support that the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces needed, that support will continue.
Violence was at its peak ever since the coming of foreigners, and every day we witnessed suicide attacks and explosions.
The World Health Organization says the number of global COVID-19 cases has been going up for the 9th consecutive week. The death toll has also increased for the 6th week straight. US, India and Brazil are the worst hit countries in the world. India is facing the most rapid rise in new cases, reporting more than 300,000 new daily cases for 10 consecutive days. The World Health Organization Director General says there is a shocking imbalance of global vaccine distribution. Western countries have been criticized for stockpiling jabs, but Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says COVAX, the global vaccine sharing initiative, is still the best chance for many lower-income countries to contain the pandemic. While India's devastating COVID surge continues, with almost 400,000 new cases reported in the past 24 hours. The country is also reporting its highest single-day death toll of nearly 3,700. The capital, New Delhi, was due to end a lockdown on Monday, but the measure has been extended by a week. More than 40 countries have pledged to help as vaccines and medical supplies run low. China has sent 61 flights to deliver supplies over the past 2 weeks. In April, China sent 26,000 oxygen concentrators and ventilators and nearly 3,800 tons of medicines and supplies. India has also received support from Russia, including 150,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccine. While more restrictions have been eased across Europe as coronavirus infections drop, in the UK, trials on mass gatherings are taking place, with COVID deaths and cases continuing to fall. Andrew Wilson reports.
It's day 2 of a 48-hour experiment in post-lockdown behaviours. 3,000 partygoers packing out an airy venue in the city of Liverpool. The airflow and content is measured, testing for all before and after. For the participants, just a long-awaited party.
We're just excited. All of us are excited. We're all on the verge of tears, ready to go in. Honestly, yeah, we're not even drunk yet, so we're ready for it.
I have literally spent about 3 weeks preparing for this outfit. Oh, so long.
Genuinely, yeah.
Deciding what to drink, deciding what to wear. It's been, honestly, big up Liverpool for having the first non-socially distanced event in the country. We love this city. We love this city.
Yeah. England reported a drop in infections of 40% last week. Analysis shows that more than 22 million people now live in areas with no coronavirus deaths in April. Off the back of a kick-started vaccine programme and a slight improvement in numbers, the French President Emmanuel Macron is now promising an easing of restrictions as well. For the past few weeks, says the government spokesman, the epidemic is losing ground in our country. It's happening slowly, it needs to go faster, we need to continue our efforts, but we can see that it is decreasing. The French government has announced a 4-phase roadmap out of lockdown, including outdoor service returning to cafes and bars and an easing of the nightly curfew from the middle of May. But although the French public is weary of restrictions, hospital numbers are still far higher than they were at this point in the previous 2 lockdowns. In Hungary, 4 million first doses of coronavirus vaccine, reaching about 40% of its population, has meant a similar easing of restrictions. Budapest Zoo has opened up again, but only to those with government-issued immunity cards. With its small population, Hungary has the second highest vaccination rate in the European Union and is the only EU nation to use vaccines from China and Russia, in addition to Western jabs. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, here in Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta has lifted the COVID-19 lockdown he had imposed in March in the capital, Nairobi, and 4 surrounding counties. The move allows a reopening of religious services, schools, bars and restaurants. President Kenyatta has also revised the current evening curfew that starts at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Initially, Nairobi County and surrounding counties were treated as one zone, with residents barred from traveling to other areas. The country has recorded nearly 159,000 cases and more than 2,700 deaths.
With regard to the zoned areas comprising of the counties of Nairobi, Machakos, Kiambu, Kajiado, and Nakuru, it is directed that the cessation of movement into and out of the zoned areas be and is hereby lifted. That the hours of curfew in the zoned area are revised to commence at 10 p.m. and end at 4 p.m. with effect from midnight on this day of May 2021 until otherwise directed. That in-person and congregational worship shall resume in strict fidelity to the guidelines issued by the Interfaith Council and the Ministry of Health. However, the attending congregation is still capped to 1/3 of the capacity of the place of worship. The operations of restaurants and eateries in the zoned areas shall resume in accordance with the guidelines issued jointly by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, and restaurants are indeed encouraged to utilize outdoor spaces to maximize on physical and social distancing.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Concerns as resistance to malarial drugs increases on the African continent.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Researchers have reported clinical evidence that shows that drug-resistant mutations of the parasite responsible for malaria could be increasing in Africa. Despite the challenge, countries across the continent are doing their best to fight the disease. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa tells us more.
While her baby sleeps, Wilhelmina watches over him, trying to keep him safe from harm. There are many dangers lurking, and one of this is the constant threat of contracting malaria. Wilhelmina lives in Lokichar, a dusty little town in the country's north. The health ministry normally provides all pregnant women with mosquito nets because of their vulnerability, but one wasn't available at the facility she visited, and she fears that she and her child are vulnerable as she has experienced frequent bouts of malaria.
The last time I had malaria, the facility didn't have the medication in stock. I went to the pharmacy, but it was expensive.
The World Health Organization estimates that there are 229 million cases of malaria worldwide. The disease killed more than 400,000 people in 2019, more than 2/3 of them children. Malaria is caused by a parasite which is carried by female Anopheles mosquitoes, and now a study published in The Lancet appears to confirm that drug-resistant mutations of the parasite responsible for malaria are gaining ground in Africa. Drug resistance is not uncommon.
Drug resistance is a naturally occurring phenomenon, whether it is to malaria or bacterial infections. Anytime a microorganism, such as the malaria parasite, is exposed to a threat, such as the drug, there are a few parasites that will survive. These parasites will survive because they are resistant or because they are capable of developing resistance.
The most effective treatments for malaria are known as artemisinin-based combination therapies.
So this artemisinin compound rapidly reduces the number of parasites within the bloodstream, and the partner drug then clears off what is left.
Certain practices, however, contribute to drug resistance.
How we contribute ourselves to drug resistance is, number one, when somebody has a fever, not bothering to have a diagnosis, self-medicating. The truth is there are many causes of fever. It's important to give an antimalarial where malaria has been diagnosed.
In the trial cited by The Lancet, more than 200 children infected by the parasite received the standard treatment and were then monitored. 3 days post-treatment, about 15% had detectable parasites. Kenya has seen a 25% reduction in malaria cases in the country, a result achieved by putting in place strategies that include improving detection of malaria, having community management strategies that involve community health workers, and starting treatment as soon as possible. Drug manufacturing companies also continue to innovate. And across the region, as information spreads, ordinary citizens continue to do their best to battle the disease. Wilkes-Anyabwa, CGTN.
South Sudan's government says it is working to meet conditions set out by the United Nations Security Council for an arms embargo imposed on the country to be lifted. The UN Security Council imposed the ban in 2018 when a civil war was raging in the country. A peace deal is now in place, but the UN says the level of intercommunal violence remains high. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Sudan's defense ministry says it is hopeful that an arms embargo could be lifted next month. The ministry says the United Nations Security Council wants unified forces currently in training camps graduated and redeployed. The UN also wants child soldiers demobilized and recruitment of forces by all parties in South Sudan halted. It also wants the country's army to be under one command. Currently, there are various armed groups which have been put together in training camps, but they are loyal to their leaders and commanders and do not take orders from South Sudan's president. South Sudan's defense ministry says it is working to meet the demands of the United Nations Security Council.
It is important that we address those issues holistically and not individually, so that, you know, we can create that professional armed force, that professional police, that professional security agent. So it is a real challenge, the issue of the logistics, but the only way to address it is really to speedily graduate these forces.
The defense ministry says the soldiers in the training camps will graduate before the end of May and then be redeployed. The government says the delay in redeploying the soldiers is due to the lack of required funds for the payment of salaries, provision of food and uniforms for the troops. The UN Security Council is expected to review the arms embargo on South Sudan on May 31st. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Plastic waste management has become a topical issue, especially in dealing with the contamination of marine and freshwater environments. Over 500 million tons of plastics end up in the oceans each year. Some of the major contributors of this waste are from Africa. In South Africa, for instance, research shows that only 16% of plastic in South Africa is recycled. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela visited a small-scale enterprise in Johannesburg that is turning plastic into usable products.
According to the United Nations, around the world, people buy about 1 million bottles per minute. half of them end up in the landfills and the ocean. The Environmental Affairs Department asserts that much of the plastic waste in the country's oceans, rivers and waterways is due to littering, inadequate waste management and overflowing landfills. But a number of South Africans are now attempting to be part of the solution. Mandle Nkosi is one of them. He started a small entity called Man Recycling.
My biggest concern is the waste that goes to the marine and get burned. It damages our environment, the ozone layer, the marine. The climate change is so affected by the failure to recycle, especially in the rural areas. That's why I'm saying people must recognize this is a huge opportunity for us to venture into a new business.
While always concerned about plastic waste in his community, desperation led him to this industry.
It was a matter of bringing bread on the table for my family. I was really desperate because I lost my job. I was not working at the time. I started slowly and small, but eventually grew to what it is today. I was towing a trolley from the street, and I managed to save very well, some good savings.
Then a short while later, his local municipality recognized his efforts and gave him access to many areas where he could pick up large amounts of waste. These days, Man Recycling operates from a secure building and collects over 18 tons of plastic waste a month. This plastic waste is then turned into usable products.
This is a storage site. It's like a warehouse. All this stuff that comes from this different transfer station comes here for sorting and the packaging so that we can send it to the correct mills. We collect a number of different products, like the plastics. As you know, plastics are different. The beverage container plastics is called the PET. Plastics, we collect that and we sort it, package it according to the color. The clear ones one side, the green ones one side, the brown ones one side. We also deal with the HDPE, they call it HDPE. It is the plastic that contains most of the time the milk, amasi, your jik, your handy, all that kind of stuff. The plastics are totally different.
Nkosi has recently been awarded a certificate from PET Recycling Company, or PETCO, in recognition of his work. PETCO supports recyclers with community programs, educational material, and awareness programs on recycling. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Egypt, some local artists have ventured into making sculptures out of spare parts and recycled materials. But this type of art is yet to gain as much following as other traditional art forms. In a move to highlight the potential of scrap art, one of Egypt's popular galleries has organized a special event to showcase this type of artwork. Here's Adil Mahroui with more.
Hossein Hussein has always been fond of sculpting. To enrich his talent, he decided to study his passion. He sculpted using all materials he could put his hands on, until scrap metals unleashed his creativity even further.
I'm a lover of my country. I always feel the urge to deliver art that reflects the rich civilization inheritance we have. We have a history which others should envy us about. With my art, I wish to emphasize the fusion of the traditional and contemporary. Together, they gave birth to these ancient sculptures in design with modern life materials.
Celebrating the 6th anniversary of his first public scrap art exhibition, Hossein is trying to redefine the Egyptian stereotype about that kind of art. Intentionally, he organized his display with a warm surrounding of paintings to his sculptures to highlight elegance of recycled art.
I was always fond of touring museums to admire the art of the scrap. I watched so many works that my mind kept thinking only about it. All my mental and visual capacities got engaged in my first artwork. Creating an art piece with scrap metal requires two talents: sculpting skills and talent of using welding and metal cutting gears.
At the gallery, he explains to visitors why such sculptures are quite costly, despite the fact that they're made up of recycled materials. He dives into details to show how he merged objects that are usually unattractive, like screw nails, nuts, and wrenches, to produce a hypnotic sculpture unlike any other.
The cost material of this type of art is lost, but the time spent to create one piece is very long. The implementation is hard. To choose the right piece at the right place to get the visuals I plan is difficult.
Light penetrates and reflects over the metal surface to give this kind of art unique magnificence, a feature that is almost impossible with any other material.
في تنوع حلو قوي في الأحجام بتاعت الشغل بتاعته.
I loved the variety he's presenting, from embodying our ancient Egyptian civilization to the modern rural life. The artwork clearly consumed a lot of effort. My favorite piece is the horse head. It stole my heart. There is harmony between the tiny pieces he used. The horse feels alive somehow.
الريفي أو الصعيدي يعني حيوية في الحصان يعني.
This is what Hossam aimed to reach, to make people see beyond the cheap, ugly material used and realize the beauty behind an artwork that can take up to 4 months to create. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. To stay with us.
Its effects are surreal, but its existence is undeniable. Mother Nature is fighting back against a species that is destroying it.
We're here to raise our voices. We know that climate change has already started and it's killing us.
It hurts. Amid the tears and the grief, however, there is hope for resolution.
We need to live in harmony with nature.
We focus on the deeds, the deals, and the people working to make a difference. This is Surviving Climate Change, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt has launched the second phase of the economic reform program that it started in 2016. The new stage is aimed at creating jobs, attracting investments, and target growth rates of over 7% by the fiscal year 2025 to 2026. CGTN's Yasa Hakim tells us more.
The Egyptian government calls it a program of structural reforms to capitalize on the previous successful IMF-backed economic measures. It will target sustainable growth, make up for the losses incurred by the COVID-19 pandemic, and achieve ambitious growth rates of 7% in 3 years.
Achieving 7% growth rate is based on several indicators, such as the success in containing the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The government is increasing public investments in different sectors, in housing, infrastructure, agriculture, in manufacturing by building industrial cities, while concentrating on IT technology and exports of goods and commodities to increase hard currency inflows and raise foreign currency reserves.
Influenced by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, one sector that will see the most growth is healthcare, Public investments will increase by a considerable 205%, opening 23 new hospitals, increasing the capacity of current hospitals, raising the number of intensive care unit beds by 55%, and incubators by 10%. Improving the climate for private sector investments is also on the agenda. But a main priority as well is reducing public debt that has risen sharply to cover the anti-COVID-19 expenses.
The government has been introducing the budget.
The plan is aimed at increasing production. This will strengthen the Egyptian pound, which will reflect on the personal incomes and therefore provide a dignified life to the people.
Implementation of the second phase of the economic program is expected to begin in the new fiscal year from the 1st of July. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In South Africa, beef producers reckon the country has tremendous opportunity to grow its beef exports. Farmers and producers are keen to grab a share of the market. CGTN Sumitra Naidu tells us more.
South African cattle farmers have developed a reputation for the quality of beef they produce. The beef industry prefers to keep volumes smaller and pays attention to specific cuts.
We've got 41% of our local industries in the hands of the emerging sector. And what we're saying is if we get the buy-in from the emerging sector and get their animals also within this value chain, or there's already a lot of the animals that are in the value chain, but if we can do it better and if we can get traceability done, we to a certain extent can include them more. And what we can do is we can expand on exporting to other countries.
Currently, South Africa exports 4% of its beef to the Middle East, China and North Africa. But industry players are looking to raise this to 20%. It will take time though. Regulations in markets like the European Union make it difficult to expand.
Some of these countries obviously is very difficult to get into. EU is very difficult to get into with regards to, or specifically in the manner that we feed our animals. So there are other specific requirements that we might not be able to adhere to, but there are other countries that don't worry about these requirements and we can export to them, and we need to optimize and use the opportunities that we have to those countries.
Disease also creates a limitation.
The one challenge that stands out is traceability, of course. So the European Union as a market focuses a lot, understandably so, on traceability of products. Where do the products come from? Can you trace it, what they call from the farm to the fork and things like that? And South Africa still has some work to do in that regard to satisfy those markets by looking internally at taking our production and traceability to the desired level where we really can satisfy those markets.
The beef industry is the second fastest growing commodity in the agricultural sector of South Africa. With the government's focus firmly on growing agriculture, meat exports overall will benefit. Currently, Brazil and Argentina lead global exports, but local farmers will argue that the quality is far from what is found in South Africa. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria's electricity problems have worsened after the recent failure of some of its power-generating plants. The country is ranked second behind India among nations with large populations that have limited access to electricity. CGTN's Phili Haza tells us how business owners across the country are facing hard times as a result of the chronic power outage.
Esther Mike has been running this salon for 3 years. She says due to poor electricity supply, she has not been able to make much profit.
Most of what we do here depends solely on electricity. We blow dry, we wash, even down to like treating of hairs. We use like electricity to do it. And then most of the time, like 80% of the time, we have to rely on generators. And then of course the fuel prices, like the whole thing has hiked, and we are barely making profit really.
The World Bank reports that businesses and households across the country lose up to $29 billion annually as a result of power failure in Nigeria. The Ministry of Power says 16 out of 28 power generating plants have either suffered a breakdown, are experiencing gas shortage, or are undergoing maintenance. It's happening at a time when Nigeria's economy is just recovering from recession and businesses are still struggling to cope from months of shutdown last year due to COVID-19.
In the energy mix of Nigeria, about 82% of our generating stations depend on gas. So when there's a shortage of gas or an outage of gas, the power generation falls. And we also have even the maintenance culture problem. We have a backlog of broken down turbines that have not been fixed. We have service maintenance contracts not being honored. We have the preventive maintenance not being executed until there's a breakdown. Then we now go into corrective maintenance.
For years, despite investments in power, Nigeria has only distributed an average of 4,000 megawatts for its over 200 million population, far from a required 200,000 megawatts, according to the Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors. Experts say beyond funding, the country's power grid is obsolete and needs to be decentralized from being mainly based in the south.
Why do they have to generate in the south and all the way to the core north? We have the different energy mix within the area. Look at the northern area, what works for them. It even put a less toll on the transmission network because you don't have to generate an all. There are losses along the line. There are lots of losses along the line. Then there is the cost of manpower to maintain the network.
The Ministry of Power has promised to rectify the problems and restore better electricity supply soon.
The government says it's in partnership with the World Bank, German firm Siemens and other private bodies to develop other sources of energy like solar to meet its goal of transmitting and distributing 25,000 megawatts of electricity by 2025.
And if that goal is met, entrepreneurs like Esther can make more profits and the country could in turn generate better revenue for its currently fragile economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
China is launching a month-long campaign in Shanghai to promote national consumption. It's held along with Shanghai's May 5th shopping festival. The event aims to accelerate the recovery of consumption. They're also trying to promote a strong domestic market under the country's dual circulation economic strategy. The promotion month is jointly organized by the Ministry of Commerce, CGTN's parent company China Media Group, and the city of Shanghai. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's coming up. Discovery of rare tombs offers a glimpse into ancient Egyptian eras.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egyptian archaeologists working on the Nile Delta have uncovered 110 rare pre-dynastic tombs. They date as far back as the period before Egypt's pharaonic kingdoms, which first emerged more than 5,000 years ago. Yasser Hakim tells us more about the importance of this discovery.
It took a lot of effort to unearth these rare monuments in the Qahliya, 200 kilometers northeast of Cairo. What makes this discovery unique is that the findings belong to 3 different ancient Egyptian eras.